You're listening to Blue Collar CEO, the podcast that's all about helping you build a better, more profitable, and more sustainable home service business. Each week, we'll cover a different topic that will help enable your company to move forward to success. And here's your host, Ryan Redding.
What is up, Blue Collar CEOs? It's Ryan. It is awesome to be with you again. If you're watching, if you're listening, wherever you are, like, hey, I always appreciate you taking time to stop by. We've had some really awesome guests lately. I hope that's been helpful for you. As always, feel free to shoot us an email at info@BlueCollar.CEO or anywhere on the socials, and let us know if there's a topic or a guest or someone you'd really like us to explore more. I love making sure we have good guests coming your way, including today. A lot of you may know this person. I'm going to introduce you to Stephen Akian. Steve is a beast of a human. He is a boxing enthusiast. The dude plays guitar. He has a passion for psychology and leadership. We're going to be talking a lot about kind of his personal journey into the trades, into his current structure and role at his almost $12 million company this year. We're going to be covering a lot of things, but one of the things he's going to get into a lot is like the role of the leader in building the team. And there's a whole lot of like self-help and a lot of like checklists and all these things, but he talks about his own personal responsibility to continue to develop himself, his own skills, so that the company can continue to grow and scale out as well. There's a lot of stuff we're going to get into. This is a great conversation. Let me introduce you to Steve. All right, Steve, I am really, really glad we're able to get you on the show today, because we were talking just before I hit record. Like, I feel like we've been like in each other's networks for a long time, but this is the first time it's been in this format. So that's awesome. But for those who maybe like don't yet know who you are, let's maybe just start there, man. Who are you and what do you do?
All right. Well, I'm Steve, owner of Akian Plumbing, Heating and Air Conditioning. Been in the industry for 16 years now. Started off doing residential, moved into commercial. Career escalated pretty quickly, got to working for a $120 million commercial company as an estimator and doing a little bit of project management and stuff like that. And then about 7 years ago, I started Akian, and that brings us to where we are today, Ryan.
That's crazy. So what did you do? What did you do before 16 years ago? Like before you got in with the big dogs doing like all the estimation stuff, like how did you find yourself landing in the trades?
Grew up in my grandparents' house. Plumber lived across the street named Joe Piccolo. Had a conversation with him when I was 19 years old. I was doing nothing. And I've always been entrepreneurial. But I caught myself a year out of high school, waking up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because I was partying with friends. And I was working at a car wash. The car wash was fun. You'd come by and I'd be playing like "Working at the Car Wash," right?
You have to do that song. It's kind of a thing.
Dude, it sounds corny, but I just had a good time. And
did you do like the really short, like jean shorts and like the kind of?
I didn't do that, but I was working out a lot, so I'd roll my sleeves up. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my god!
But anyways, so grandparents' house, neighbor across the street, Joe. Really admired that he had, everything that I think any person would want. He raised 3 good kids, all are in the trades, owned a house, couple vacation homes, had the toys, boat, motorcycle, nice car for him and his wife. And so I asked him, "Joe, what do you think I should do, man?" He goes, "Hey, I don't know, kid." He used to smoke cigars. Took a cigar. I was like, "I don't know, kid. Try plumbing." I'm like, "Okay," And so Joe was a plumber, and yeah, I put an ad on Craigslist. I don't know if there's probably like anyone under the age of 30 probably needs to explain what Craigslist is.
That's hilarious, and now I feel old. Thanks for that.
Yeah, sorry. But I put an ad on Craigslist, man. And sometimes I think about the ad I put up and I'm like, man, that could have gone sideways.
You put up an ad for someone to hire you?
Yeah.
It's like the opposite. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. It's like normally people are using Craigslist like, we're looking for help or whatever, or I'm in search of a single woman. But you're all like, I'm looking for someone to teach me how to smoke a cigar and lay down some pipe. This is crazy. All right, so you throw out an ad on Craigslist, which is like a weird. I was gonna say like an internet board, like job board, but that doesn't even make sense for people who are like post AOL. But all right, go on. So you put up this job post. You're this request for hiring, like out of
Yeah.
desperation on Craigslist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's why I was saying like the post really could have gone sideways because I was like 19 years old, strong, fast learning, and
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
this dude
everyone's
called
seen those videos. I'm sure everyone knows what you're talking about. And that's how it goes.
this dude calls me out of Dorchester, Massachusetts, and I'm living with my mom at the time, and he calls like for whatever reason I left the home phone number on the post. My mom gets the voicemail. She's like, "This dude called you, but he's a drunk," and I'm like, what? And I listen to the voicemail. I'm like, he's not a drunk, Ma. He's just from England, right? And so I right, I like seriously
English drunk, maybe.
maybe.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's how I started. That was it. He gave me a chance, and that was 16 years ago.
That is crazy. So how, because I know something that's really important for you is like you get big into like things like leadership, what motivates people, the psychology behind stuff like that, even like being mindful and practicing mindfulness. Like how did those sort of ideas, how were they introduced to you for the first time? I guess one, and two, like what was that like when you started exploring? What's it like to influence, motivate, inspire, and lead other people?
That's a good question, Ryan. Thanks for asking that. So I've always been resourceful. That's what led me to that Craigslist post because I'm like, okay, like I need to get a job. Where do I start? Try calling places. Craigslist, right? Like I've always been very resourceful, and so being resourceful as a leader is probably one of the most important things because you can have all the resources in the world. It doesn't fucking matter if you don't know what to do with them, right?
Yeah.
So you start a business, right? You start learning things that you didn't know. I mean, oh man, I needed more than just a plumbing license to run a business. Like, who would have figured that,
Who would
right?
have thunk?
Yeah, who would have thunk? And let me tell you, starting out that way and not having much of a business background, about 2 years in, I ended up about $500,000 in trouble with the IRS, payroll tax issue, which, we've heard these stories before, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so my story was payroll tax issue, which was uncovered when I brought someone in to do my books. We were going and doing taxes every year, but I was doing it with this schmuck who just wasn't, well, I shouldn't call him a schmuck, but tax guy like advised me, right?
Did you find that person on Craigslist also?
I may have. I didn't. He was a referral, unfortunately. But anyways, I had someone come in, and within 30 minutes, they say to me, Steve, you probably owe like $500,000 to the IRS. You know what the first words that came out of my mouth?
I can think of a couple. What were they?
Well, it sounds like we got some work to do.
I would not have thought those words.
And I really think that speaks to my style of leadership. It's always seeking solutions to problems. Problems are going to come up. And fortunately, before I came across stoicism and before I intentionally started working on my leadership skills, I sort of had some principles that I was already leading my life by. So a lot of it came naturally, and then some hard lessons, forced growth. So.
Well, you say that that's forced growth, but I kind of feel like the best. I mean, unfortunately, some of the best learning comes from really shitty circumstances. Like I remember, oh gosh, I was maybe early 20s and I was like taking like flying lessons, like to learn how to fly an airplane. My dad flew, his dad flew, like it's kind of in my family. And I remember there's like two instructors. Like I was like going back and forth, like who do I want to spend more time like in a plane learning from? And one guy, never been in an accident, plane never failed, like everything was always perfect. And on paper, that's what sounds amazing. Like you want to work with someone who's never had an issue. That's how good they are. What I found out though is the best instructors were the ones who like all the shit would hit the fan and they lived. Like they walked away from engine failure. They had to force land planes. Like those guys had harder lessons that they learned that other people have no idea. But that experience comes to bear. And unfortunately, that's the only way you get that level of insight, right? Of like going through stuff like that.
I mean, that's not an experience you can pay for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of my passions is boxing. So I've been going to the boxing club for a few years now, and I think it's because I draw so many parallels from the business world to boxing. Like, you're working group exercises, the exercises kick your ass, man. Like, like sitting there, like I'll do a plank exercise, like with the trainer, like 2 minutes into the plank, your puddle of sweat's on the floor and you can like see yourself in a mirror. It's like your mirror image of yourself in the sweat. And I'm just like, don't be a bitch. You could do it. 10 more seconds. Just hold on. Fucking hang in there. Right. 5 more seconds. Right. Just like keep going. And I think that's one of the things that probably a lot of people are feeling now. Like that message, like that self-talk, right? Keep going.
Yeah.
This too shall end. Right. This pain will be over soon. And once you're through with it, it's like you are tenfold what you were before. And I think that's probably something a lot of people need to be hearing right now, judging by what I'm seeing on social media, everybody freaking out with the times.
Well, and social media is always a great source of information for anything. So, but no, I think you're still on to something. I was talking to someone, who was I talking to just a couple weeks ago about like back in 2020, like everything was chaotic and a mess, and right, customers were panicking, different governments were responding different ways, companies. I remember like early on, some companies shut their doors super fast. But like everyone was chaotic and no one really knew what to do. Turns out that season was gangbusters for home service companies, right? And a whole lot of people made a whole lot of money. Not that things weren't weird or stressful or chaotic or whatever they were, but because their customer base was locked in their house, they were no longer like postponing repair work that they otherwise would have, right? Because like everything's just getting abused and used at a higher degree. HVAC, plumbing, electrical, doesn't matter. So everyone did really decently in 2020 across the board. Now I think there's like this overcorrection where like the market's kind of like contracted. Things have largely gone back to normal, but people who thought that they were successful because they're brilliant wizards in 2020 are now realizing they don't know what it's like to struggle. They don't know what it's like to like navigate uncertainty. They don't know what it's like to lead and inspire people. Like it's now exposing all these things. And it's kind of like this like, and I guess the other metaphor is like, what is it? Smooth waters never a skilled sailor makes. Is that the expression? Right. So like, you need the adversity.
Just like your airplane story.
Yeah, totally. Like you need to like be doing a plank exercise for 2 minutes and know how bad that sucks to know that you can go through it and know that you are fine, and not just fine, but you're better for it. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't like. Discomfort. They don't like struggle. They don't like that. So how, okay, so transitioning from not a plumber to a plumber to a plumber to a business person to a business person to a leader, I would probably make an argument are like very, very different transitions, right? They're not just natural evolutions, and they require different skills, different exposures, but always the ability to learn. Was that ever something that you found difficult to kind of be presented with a concept of something going, hey, this is a whole new idea, world, a whole new skill set that I did not know existed, but clearly it's stuff that I need to start paying attention to now to get that next level of capability under my belt?
Well, quite a bit to unpack there.
Yeah. I ask questions for a living a lot.
I've always been entrepreneurial, and I've always been to kind of summarize the type of kid I was, which, by the time you're 8, your character is pretty much formed. About like 80% of your character is formed by the time you're 8 years old. And so to kind of tell you what I was like when I was 8 years old, I got my first Lego set, threw the instructions away
Yes.
because I wanted to build my own thing,
Good for you.
right, with those building blocks, with my, uh, and so I've always been entrepreneurial, and creating something is something that I've always wanted to do. I always knew that I would be doing this. And when you have that drive and when you have that desire, it's like, yeah, of course I need to double down on my leadership skills. Of course I need to train and doing on loving to do those things that you don't want to do, right? People think I'm crazy because I mean, I don't do a cold plunge, but like I'll turn the shower on, 2.5 minutes of just like fuck ice cold. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, right? Incoming water temperature is like 40 degrees right now.
It gets cold, I'd imagine. Yeah.
It's cold, right? And like, so like, it's not about being a hard ass. It's about practicing that shit. You know what I mean? Like sitting there and being like, I really don't want to do this, but you're going to be better on the other side of it. Right. So like, here's another thing that most of us don't want to do. Most of us don't want to admit that we're wrong. So one exercise that I do daily, and I've been doing this for some time now, at the end of the day, like literally I'm in my bed about to go to sleep. I will admit to one thing I was wrong about that day. Either the way I interacted with someone, the way I handled something, I'll just admit, I'm wrong. That puts you in a state of like, yeah, I'm open. I'm open to.
That is a really interesting idea. So do you find yourself like when you force yourself to have to like utter out loud, or I guess on paper, I was wrong about this, does it force you to be more intentional and thoughtful about the next interaction you would have? Like, does it force you to go, do I want to have to write this down this way? Or do I want to navigate it differently? Does it force that sort of like decision point that otherwise most people just probably breeze right on through?
Absolutely.
Huh.
It humbles you at the end of the day, man. It's like, shit. And it doesn't only have to be work related. It could be anything personal life. I shouldn't have, responded to that person in that way. I shouldn't have used that tone. And I'll tell you that as I continue doing this exercise, I am finding it harder and harder to find something, right? Which requires some meditation. Like I had a day the other day. I was sitting there and for 5 minutes, I'm like, I must have done something, right? Like something, at least something I could have done better. So it forces that thought, makes you really kind of look within yourself. I'll tell you, when I first started the exercise though, Ryan, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna write one thing down. I got a whole laundry list of shit I could have put down when I started doing this, So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's also cool that you can kind of see the progress over time. I mean, I don't know what it's like to like have mistakes to have to own and be responsible for. Like that's not something I struggle with. Just kidding. Hope anyone knows like I am full of sarcasm right now, and I don't know why. But it is really cool though. You can
probably
see
because you're talking to someone from Boston.
It's like, yeah, that totally works, right? But it's totally like one of those things where it's cool that you can see like the evolution over time. Like, hey, here's a list of it, and the humility involved with having to be so exhaustive. But then like to see that list get smaller and smaller, it's so interesting though. Like, so you are very intentional about yourself. Like, not because I hear, I'd say something I see a lot of people slip into, and I'm not saying it's a good practice, is they slip into blaming everyone else for their reality, right? And it's almost like this, like, sometimes it's driven by ego, sometimes it's driven by this like victim mentality, but it's always the same of like this inability to own your own shit and blame everyone else for it. And it seems like you're doing a very intentional job of doing the exact opposite, right? Of like owning everything you possibly can that's yours. That's very intentional. It's very thoughtful. It's very inward facing. how did you find yourself going? Even you mentioned stoicism earlier. Like I'd imagine there's a handful of people listening right now who don't even know what that term means. How did you find yourself turning into that sort of philosophical sort of underpinning? Has it been something you grew up with? Is it something you were introduced to later and started realizing the power and the freedom within it? Like what has your story been like being mindful and thoughtful and even practicing like stoicism based values?
I've always been a student of life. Always. Academically, not so much, right? But in regards to observing life, people around me, how they're interacting, that's always been something that really piqued my interest. Something that I've always lived by. This was before I came across Stoicism. Was, hey, could have been worse, or it could always be worse. And I have friends that were like, that is such a terrible
Yeah.
lens to see life, Steve. And I'm like, I don't know, is it though? Because it could always be worse. So like when something would happen, I would be like, well, it could have been worse, right? Like no matter how bad I mean it happened, I always viewed it that way. And I think that helped me see the opportunity in things. Because rather than just fucking complaining about it and bitching about it, I was like, well, it could have been worse, you
It
know?
could have been $1 million
First,
of payroll tax to pay. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
yeah, man. Yeah, man. Like amor fati, like love, like anything that comes your way, the challenges, the obstacles.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it. There's things I've overcome. I'm grateful for every single one of them. I shared something with a friend once, and he was like, "Wow, like, imagine how much further ahead you'd be if like you didn't go through that." I'm like, "That's the thing, man. Though I wouldn't be here talking to
You would
you
be
if I didn't
here.
go through that, man."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
How were
So,
you
so
how were
yeah.
you introduced to stoicism? Like what was that story like? And for those maybe who don't know what it is, let's maybe start there. Like what is that term and how did you come into it?
So it's the Stoic philosophy. Those who may know of a great coach named Bill Belichick, right? Like he was really deep into Stoicism throughout his coaching career. But it wasn't him that introduced it to me. It was actually a friend who like still reminds me every time I see him. He's like, "Hey, I'm the one that introduced you to Stoicism, Steve." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, yeah." But yeah, so I was introduced to me from a friend. I bought the book, The Daily Stoic, right here.
Oh yeah, yeah, check it out.
The Daily Stoic, right? Did I hold that the right way? Yeah, The Daily Stoic, right? And the Daily Stoic, you're familiar with it, Ryan, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
one passage, right, every day. And it just like resonated with me, man. My heritage, I am part Greek, so like Stoicism originally formed with just like old guys hanging out on the porch and just talking shit pretty much. If you really kind of look into it, that's pretty much how the philosophy started. It was just guys that lived life and were like pretty much talking like we are right now.
I have when I took like I guess it was when I was in my undergrad, I took like basic philosophy classes, kind of just doing general education stuff, right? The idea of like Stoic philosophy was one of the things was talked about. And I always had these like really funny images of especially at Greek culture of them half being snarky, half being condescending, half being like, woe is me. Uh, it's like this like but there's something really freeing in it. Of like just practicing that. And actually, we talked to a friend of mine, Stephen Christopher, also is really big in mindfulness practices, a lot of stoic based behaviors, because I don't think he'd consider himself full bore, but yeah, it's a really freeing thing. Do you feel like that's something that helps you have better skills and capabilities as you show up to work every day, to show up to lead your team every day?
Absolutely. And the reason for it is it's just the principles. the principles straight out for face value, but two, it slows you down
Mm.
so that you could stop and think and be intentional with the next thing you're going to say, the next thing you're going to do. Going back to what you said a few minutes ago about people wanting to be so right and blame others for their shortfallings and not looking within. Do you know what do you think? What do you think the motivator for that type of behavior is?
Oh, that's a good question. My knee jerk, I would maybe argue, is fear, but I think fear is kind of wrapped in insecurity. If I probably had to play that out, that's probably where I'd go. But I feel like you have a different
Yeah.
perspective on this. I'd love to hear it.
Well. It is fear. It's loss of love. It's fear,
Mm.
like the fear of losing love, like right, like losing face, being wrong. We have these like stories that run in the back of our heads, like, no, you need to be right because if we're right, we're highly valued, and if we're highly valued, we're accepted by our tribe or our community or whatever you want to call it. Like there's all this stuff going on in our subconscious that's just controlling these
Mm.
like patterns and behaviors that if we don't like sit and think and meditate on the way we acted and behaved and spoke and showed up that day, like some people go their whole lives
Yeah.
never receiving that gift of just like shit. I don't have to be that way. There's a better way to live.
Oh, that's really good, man. If somebody's listening right now, because we covered a lot of things, and I think I think the people who listen to the show, right, they're just like you, and like a lot of people, like they tend to be a blue collar industry. They probably don't have a lot of like professional or if what's the word I'm looking for? Structured business acumen training. Right? They didn't go to college, they didn't go to business school. They kind of learn it sometimes through hard knocks, sometimes through a mentor or an employer gave them an opportunity. But they've found themselves in position to have a company, have a business, have the weight of taking care of people and their families and their futures all together. And that's a burden that not a lot of people experience. But it is a shared experience by those who do. Right, when you know what it's like to carry $1 million of payroll expense, like that's kind of a class of obligation that very few people understand, except for the people who do. Um, so, in thinking about all these things, um, if somebody's listening right now, regardless of kind of where they are in the development spectrum, what sort of things might you encourage? Are there 2 or 3 points of advice or insights that you find particularly helpful or inspiring that you think would be beneficial to the men and women of the trades who are in similar positions?
Yeah. So I'm going to start answering this question by just saying where Akian is today. So this year we had another phenomenal year of growth. It's good. We're going to be 7 years in business in April, and within that time, we're 12 million in
Good for
revenue
you, man.
is what we're pacing this year. And I say
That's
that
awesome.
proudly with a healthy bottom line, and we have a great team behind it. And the reason I say that is because as the business grows and develops, right, it will only develop at the same rate at which you do as a leader.
Mm.
So if you're all focused on the business, if you're all focused on those KPIs and not your KPIs and how you're feeling as an individual, well, let me backtrack here. So a couple weeks ago, I had someone in my office. We were just talking, going over business stuff. We might potentially be purchasing his business, and he has this belief. He's an older gentleman. He's been doing it for a long time. Fountain of knowledge. I mean, just such a smart guy. But he has this belief that everyone in this business goes out with a heart attack or a stroke,
Mm.
and that's not how it has to be. You know, I sleep well every night. sleep great. And, I say that because my house is in order. And by that, I'm not just talking about, I'm not, that's a metaphor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it's kind of like a lengthy, maybe, answer to your question, but that's sort of my piece of advice there.
No, it's lengthy, but in Akian fashion, it's intentional and it's thoughtful. You're breaking it up. You're not making it about do these 3 hacks and you'll be magically successful. You're basically saying do the work required to take care of your mind, to take care of your body, to take care of your spirit or soul or whatever someone's view of that is. And even those around you, like you didn't get into that directly, but I felt like you were kind of leaning into that nuance of influencing your team and your community and your families, and like always leaving that ripple behind. I think that sort of intentional focus is really what sets you apart, and it is really, really amazing to see the success you're having. And in success, like we're talking like monetary success for most people, but in reality, like I would argue the success for you is you can sleep well at night. Your house is in order. That is a massive testament to what you're doing. The finances are like the symptom. Like that's the byproduct of you doing those things well.
Yeah.
So congratulations, man. If somebody did want to hit you up, talk to you, stop by your shop and kind of learn some of your patterns and like practices and kind of what drives you, is there a good way for somebody to hit you up?
Yeah. My cell phone's fine. 617-894-1016. So feel free to call or shoot me a text. And I'd be happy to have a chat, get to know you.
Dude, I'm so proud to be connected with you and honored that you were able to take time, take a few minutes and like stop by and just talk. Super proud to know you. Keep up the great work. I cannot wait to see what you continue to do and the mark you continue to make, dude. It was awesome having you on.
Thanks, Ryan.
This episode was hosted by Ryan Redding, author of the book on digital marketing for plumbing and HVAC contractors, and founder of Levergy, the digital marketing solution for serious home service companies. You can subscribe to Blue Collar CEO on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us online at BlueCollar.CEO and find us on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another awesome episode. See you soon.